Welcome to Operation 360. My name's Sivy, and I just wanted to do a quick tutorial on how I clean my AR-15s. So let's get into it. The first thing you'll need to do is make sure it's clear. Point the rifle in a safe direction. Pull the charging handle. Make sure there's no round in the chamber. Make sure there's no ammunition in the room you're in, so that there's no chance that a round could find its way in there. Next step, remove these pins. Sometimes you can just remove one of them. If you're in the field or something, you need to do a quick wipe down. Maybe there's too much carbon in there. This is one way you can do it pretty quickly. Is just remove this back pin. But for our purposes, we're going to take the upper receiver off completely. Front pin, pull it out, and they slide apart. Next step is to pull the charging handle, and the bolt carrier group will pull out with it. Just do it slowly. You don't want everything flying everywhere. There's no risk of you losing anything yet, but just be slow and deliberate. And remove the charging handle. There's just 2 feet that kind of slip into their little places in the upper receiver. So just find the spot and slip it right out. You can do this with a few simple things. So the most important thing that I recommend you use is Q-tips. You're going to need quite a few of them. The next thing you're going to want is a couple of rags. So you can use some old busted up rags. That's totally fine, but I like to use some sort of quality rags because I feel like they'd clean it easier. So I have just a sort of hand towel here and a washcloth. The next thing you're going to want is some gun lube. So I got this break-free mil-spec CLP, but there's a ton of products that you can choose from. Doesn't mean one is better than the other. This is just what I like to use. This is a cleaning kit I put together when I was in the military, nearly a decade ago. There are a couple of things that I think are pretty important to have, but again, not completely necessary. The only things that I find absolutely necessary are the things that I just went over. But a bore snake is up there as well. There are other ways you can clean your barrel, but nothing you can make would be better than a bore snake. So you may want to invest in these. They're pretty cheap. This one's for a shotgun. Another thing is a paintbrush. It doesn't matter which. I found this one. It's a 1-inch paintbrush with pretty stiff bristles, but not too crazy. I find it's easy to get into small crevices in the trigger assembly and places like that, or you're just trying to brush it over after you've already cleaned it, but there's just still some residue. Paintbrushes work great. This type of brush is just a pretty stiff bristled brush. These work great as well. Some dental picks. These work wonderful on your bolt. I just have a few different types that I stole from the kits we used in the Army. Just a few different types of dental picks, different angles to get into difficult spots. This tool, which is called a combat application tool, and it has a few different tools. It's almost like a Swiss Army knife for cleaning your rifles. So, like I said, there's some tools in here that I think are really valuable, but still you don't necessarily need them to get clean firearm. So, you know, there's all these companies that make gun cleaning kits and shit like that for who knows how much, and that's fine, you can go that route if you'd like to, but listen, this is like a few dollars, maybe like under 10 I think. You got rags laying around. You already have Q-tips, or if you don't, you might want to question your hygiene habits. And if you have a firearm, you already have oil, I hope. Paintbrushes are super cheap. These brushes are nice. This tool was the most expensive part of my kit. I think it was upwards of $30. So let's keep it moving. So there's only a couple of steps here, and you know, cleaning a firearm can be kind of intimidating, especially when there's some small parts like this bolt carrier group has, but they're easy to keep track of if you have a nice surface to work on. So first step is to remove the firing pin, retaining pin. If you have some fingernails, you can just stick your fingernail in there and slip it out. If not, you can try to find something around the house maybe, but you should be able to just slip it right out. Set it aside. Next step is to get the firing pin out. I just like to slap the bolt carrier group against my palm, and the firing pin should slip right out. Twist the cam pin, just twist it like this, pulls right out to pull the bolt out. And that's it for this. And there's one other step with the bolt, which is not absolutely necessary, but I do it every time I clean my rifles, is to pull the extractor out, which is really easy. You have the tools you need already. All you have to do is depress the spring underneath the extractor, use your firing pin, and poke the retaining pin out, and then grab it with your hand, pull it right out. Extractor's out, bolts disassembled, and that's it for those. I like to leave it as is and begin cleaning the bolt carrier group and the bolt itself. So I'll just take one of my rags and begin wiping it down. Try to get all the oil and carbon off. Pretty straightforward process here. And this is where the Q-tip comes in handy. I use it to get into these small spots like where the firing pin, retaining pin was. Just kind of get in there, get the carbon out of there. A couple other spots. And this is the part where you have to be careful. You don't want to get the fibers lodged into the carrier key, but the Q-tip should slip right in there. Just twist it around, pull it back out. Just don't push it too hard. You don't want anything to get caught in there. Just like that. And just use as many Q-tips as you need until they come out clean. You might put some oil on the end of a Q-tip. It can help loosen up some of that carbon. You can see that. So another area I like to use a Q-tip for is in here and into where the cam pin goes. Just kind of get the carbon out of there. Again, maybe put some oil on your Q-tip and try to loosen up some of that carbon in there. Other areas for a Q-tip right here and here. That's decent. So first time you'll use this tool is right here. This is a paper towel, so I'm just going to tear off a part. You know, they make like sort of gauze pieces, like 1 inch by 1 inch, I think, which is what you would use on here, but a paper towel works just fine. Just before I use this, I just used a rag and would stuff it in there. I like to pull it through. See, that works all right. But this is the first time you'll use this. But the most important side is the side where your bolt goes, because that's going to be the most grimy part. If I didn't have this tool, I would just use 7,000 Q-tips again, this is another place you can use some oil. Just throw a little bit on there, help loosen up some of that carbon. And another area the Q-tip is great for is inside here. Gonna be quite dirty in there, but it'll just take some time and some Q-tips, and I just basically do this sort of thing until all the Q-tips come out relatively clean. So that's the bolt carrier. Onto the bolt and firing pin. For the firing pin, I just like to first clean it with the rag. Kind of use my fingernails and get in there. Or second time you'll be using this tool. This is a part meant for the firing pin. Just slip it in there, and I mean, it works alright. So these dental picks come in handy here, just to kind of scrape it off. And it should shine again. This tool misses a ring, so I'm not sure I vouch for it 100%. So the firing pin, retaining pin just wipes clean. Don't have to go too hard on that. Cam pin, same thing, just wipe it down. So you can also use a Q-tip to get in this hole where the firing pin slips in. But that'll pretty much do it for the cam pin. And another time you'd use a tool is on the bolt. There can be quite a bit of carbon buildup around here. So this part of the tool comes in handy here. Just slips on and you twist it around. But this is also a place where one of your dental picks is good to use. The curved one like this is really nice for this area. Get quite a bit of carbon off. Q-tips again can be good here. This is where I might put some oil on the Q-tip again. And just kind of get your Q-tip in these little areas where the extractor was, back here. Wipe it down with your rag. Pretty straightforward, just kind of get all the grime off of there. Another thing you could do, but it's not super necessary, I skipped over it in the beginning, is to remove the buffer spring all you do is press on this little pin here and keep some pressure on the spring, and it'll slip out. Not much you have to do here unless you're in a super dusty environment. This is something I would just use one of my rags to wipe down. It doesn't get too dirty in there, like I said, unless you're in a dusty environment. So you can skip that. That's one of the things that's not absolutely necessary, but something I still do. And as far as the trigger group goes, you want to make sure to keep some pressure on the hammer. Place it on fire and slowly let the hammer up. And this is a place that where it doesn't get too dirty. So I would just take a Q-tip and just kind of get in there until it's decently clean. And you can use a paintbrush here to dislodge any dust or pieces of carbon that got in there. Blow it out. And that's pretty much it for the trigger assembly. Put it back on safe. And for the rest of this, I only clean if it's dusty. The magwell is not ever that bad unless you're in a dusty, dry environment. So that's pretty much it for the lower receiver. And on to the best part, the upper receiver. This will be the dirtiest part of your firearm. This is an area where I certainly would use oil to loosen up the carbon in there. I would just put a few drops in there, get a Q-tip, work it around, and I might let it sit for a few minutes and then come back, use a rag to get in here wherever you can fit it, and Q-tips for the other places where it's too tight. You can bend the Q-tip like this and get into these tight areas. Just go until you feel it's clean enough. Put on some music or your favorite show. And to clean the barrel, you just take your bore snake, slip it in there. It'll drop through because it's weighted on one end. And you just pull it through. Do it a couple times. Make sure it's clean. Point it up at a light and look through it, make sure there's nothing in there. And that's pretty much it as far as the upper receiver goes. Just ensure that all your attachments are tight. So reassembling and lubricating is pretty straightforward. AR-15s do like to run pretty wet. Take the bolt carrier and all the pieces that go to the bolt, put them in one area and start assembling. Take the extractor, place it in there. There's no need to oil it. Just depress the spring, take the retaining pin and place it back in its hole. You might have to push down, let off, push forward and back, but it'll slip right in there. Take your bolt carrier and your bolt, place some lube. You can see where on every piece inside your upper receiver and on your bolt carrier and your bolt, you can see where there's wear marks, and that's pretty much where you'll put the lube. Wherever you see wear marks, wherever it's shiny or scratched, that's where you'll put lube. Doesn't have to be a ton, but I just throw some on there. Maybe take a Q-tip, work it around. And slip it into the bolt carrier. Put some on the cam pin. You can just use your fingers if you're brave enough. and slip it into where it goes. One of the holes is bigger than the other on the bolt, so just twist it until you find the right one. Turn the cam pin. You'll slip the firing pin back in its place. No need to lubricate it. Take your firing pin retaining pin, slip it into its spot. There it goes. And ideally, the bolt should move freely. And this is a good test to just kind of flick it like this. If the bolt slips out, it's well lubed and well cleaned. You'll take your charging handle before you reinstall it. Just give it a quick wipe down. Take one of your rags. I like to bunch it up, kind of stick it in there, run it back and forth a few times. That's pretty much good, and you can see where it points on your charging handle where you should lube. Use a Q-tip, make sure it's well covered. Stick the charging handle back in its slots. Should slip right in. And take your bolt. Throw some oil on there where the wear points are. You can put some more oil on once you have it in. Place it in. Should lock into place. You could throw some oil down on the bottom here, on the sides. Function it a little bit, get the oil moved around. Take your lower receiver, buffer spring, place it back in the buffer tube. Put the lower receiver on the upper receiver and function it. Throw some more lube in there. Function it, make sure it's well lubed, and then a functions check. You'll just cycle it, place it on fire, point it in a safe direction, squeeze the trigger, keep the trigger held, function the charging handle, release the trigger, squeeze the trigger. Do that a couple times until you're confident that everything's working right. Place it on safe. And as far as the exterior goes, I just wiped down all the excess oil that got everywhere. Alright, so I think that's it. I think I've covered everything. If I forgot anything, I'll put it in the comments. If you have any questions, leave a comment and I'll get back to you. If you have any suggestions for videos, please leave them in the comments. Or if you just want to talk shit, do that too. Thank you for watching.